we've been doing a series related to current events as it relates to the second coming of Christ. And that's been our subject probably since around the 1st of May, with a Mother's Day message kind of interspersed in there. So if you're interested in the subject of the second coming of Christ, if you are interested in the subject of current events as they relate to Bible prophecy, I encourage you to go and listen to those messages, because it is very relevant, pertinent information, very timely information. A lot of the sermons I've been teaching, I'm reading headlines from the major newspapers and articles that just basically tell us exactly what the Bible said would be the case in the last days. It's here. It's happening. Everything that Jesus predicted and the prophets predicted would be happening in the last days is happening today. And so we are going to continue this morning with that series, The Promise of His Coming. And we're going to be looking at the Antichrist and the Mark of the Beast. So the title of this message is The Mark of the Beast. It's probably going to be part 1 of 2. We'll see how far I get here this morning. But again, another prediction the Bible made 2,000 years ago, and we see it happening right before our very eyes. If you would open your Bibles to the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 13. Notice that it's not the book of Revelations, plural, because it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. If you go back and read Revelation chapter 1, it's not Revelations, although there are a lot of things that are revealed in the book of Revelation. The primary focus is the revelation, singular, of Jesus Christ, his return to the earth, his coming in glory to set up his kingdom. That's the whole purpose of the book of the Revelation. Revelation chapter 13 and verse 16 says this: "And he causes all, the small and the great, and the rich and the poor, and the freemen and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one should be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. It's interesting, as I mentioned in our study the last several weeks about Satanism and witchcraft on the rise, is that the number 666 has become cool in our culture. It's become a cool thing to tattoo 666 on your body in a very revealing spot where everybody can see it. People are buying T-shirts and sweatshirts that have the 666 on them and wearing them around proudly. Some musicians are promoting the 666, and so it's just amazing. I mean, we're already being conditioned. People are already being conditioned, especially the younger people, to not think that this is a big deal, that they are going to be taking the mark of the beast. And God is predicting this. God is foretelling this. God is showing us the future. This was written 2,000 years ago, and yet we see today everything is aligning. Now, the mark of the beast is related, of course, to the beast. And the beast is the one world dictator who is going to come on the scene, who is going to require everyone. It is not going to be something that will be voluntary. It may be voluntary initially. People ask me, well, are the people who are putting computer chips in their bodies right now in New York or in Sweden or in London, the people who are putting computer chips in the palm of their hand, is that the mark of the beast? And my answer is no. It is a precursor to the mark of the beast, because when the mark of the beast comes, it's going to be required. It's not going to be voluntary. It will be demanded upon the population of the earth, of the civilized world, and anybody the Antichrist can get to through technology. They will be mandated. They will be required. It will begin to become something that you will lose economic privileges. Eventually, you will be landed in prison. And then eventually, ultimately, if you don't take the mark, you will have your head lopped off. You will be beheaded. And so everything that we see, the chipping of our animals, I have chips in my dogs. And, they've been running these chips for 20 years now in the animals and livestock to track the herds of livestock that are roaming on the open plains. They're using the chips for identification purposes. If a dog gets lost, an animal gets lost, that way the vet can scan it, know its name, its owner's address, what surgeries it's had, what vaccinations it's had, what allergies it has to medications and so forth. All of this is not the mark of the beast yet, because it's not a dictator who's demanding and requiring that you get this or you die. But it is all leading up to the mark of the beast, certainly. The technology is there to track us. We're tracked everywhere we go with our cell phones, whether they're turned on or not, whether we want to be tracked or not. They know where we are. If the FBI wants to find you, they're going to find you. And so we have the technology of GPS. So for the tracking purposes, the mark will allow the government to track people and know where they are. And it will be for the purpose of identification, so that you will be basically known immediately. There's no more disguises. There'll be no way to fool the government at that point as to your identity. They will know exactly who you are at that time. And so it's going to give total control and power to this coming dictator, who will be the Antichrist, and he will be empowered by the devil himself. The mark is going to be a sign of allegiance to him. It's going to be demanded that he be worshipped as God at the halfway point of the tribulation period, as we're going to see here this morning. He is going to demand total allegiance. He wants you to be, or anyone out there to be, who's listening to this message, marked with his mark. He wants to have you branded with his name on you, because he wants possession of you. He wants you to be submitted to his totalitarian rule, his dictatorship, his oligarchy. He's going to come and he is going to rule the world cruelly and with evil and malice and violence. And he is going to demand absolute and total submission to his authority. And that's what's coming. That's what the Bible tells us is coming. It would require a state-of-the-art technology for this to happen. This couldn't have happened 50 years ago, guys, or any time prior, really, to the advent of the computer chip and the internet. There would be no way that one leader in the world could track everybody in the world and identify everybody in the world prior to the development and the invention of the technology that we see today. And so this couldn't really have even been possible prior to 25, 30 years ago. And now, with the advent of the internet and the interconnectivity of the whole world through cell phones, I mean, even people in third world countries have cell phones. They're given cell phones by their government. They're given cell phones by Facebook and Google. They fly drones over Africa. Facebook has drones that fly over Africa in order to provide Wi-Fi service to parts of the world where there is no Wi-Fi service, India. And they're doing it for the good of man, the good of humanity, but they're setting up the network that the Antichrist is going to take over. You have Elon Musk and SpaceX sending out satellites into space that are going to create an interconnectivity of satellites communicating with each other and communicating down to the earth for the coming 5G network. I'll get into more of this next week, but it's all here. You have to have the state-of-the-art technology in place. We could check that box right now. That technology is here. You'd have to have a breakdown of national sovereignty, where countries diminish the value of having borders, where countries diminish the value of having a national identity, because the Antichrist wants to come in and take over all the world. He doesn't want to just take over Europe. He's going to likely start out of Europe, but ultimately he's going to rule the world. And so you have to have the populations of the earth, really for the first time in history, say, hey, we don't care about being American. We don't care about being Mexican or Canadian or British or French or Spanish or Grecian. or Roman. We don't care about national boundaries. We don't care about national sovereignty. Just give us what we want. Give us our stuff. Leave us alone. Make sure we have all of our physical needs met, and give us our Wi-Fi. Give us our cable television. Give us our online video game playing. And then we'll sign on the dotted line. We'll give up our sovereignty, and we'll give up our currency, and we'll give up our national leadership for an international leadership. And again, probably the United States is the only impediment really to this happening. And there's a whole political movement in this country that wants to basically lower our national sovereignty, lower our walls, open the floodgates, let anybody in that wants to come in and become part of a world system, part of a European world system. There's a whole political party that's very popular, and it's quite blatantly, socialism is communism, and there are many presidential candidates who are running for office who are socialists. They're communists. And so this is here. I mean, all of this is here. We're standing in the way still because we have our identity as a Christian nation that we will not let go of. Many in this country will not let go of our Christian nation. We will not let go of our sovereignty. We will not let go of the fact that God has made us a city on a hill to help to really to benefit the world. Our country has done more to help the world than any other nation in history. But there's a battle for the political leadership of our country, and we can't just sit by idly. We have to be involved in the process. As corrupt as politics are, it is a gift of God that we have a vote, and that our votes count in this country. But there will be a time in the future where all the developed nations of the world will lose their national identity, and they will be assimilated into this one world economic and political and ultimately religious system. Europe's already there. I mean, you have the European Union. They're already ripe for this, and so are many parts of, especially of the Western world. So what's coming, the Bible tells us, is a one-world government, a one-world economy, a one-world currency, and a one-world religion. And so that's what's coming. We see the handwriting on the wall today, and we see how all of these things could happen in a moment if everything was aligned. Revelation 13 verse 1 tells us, and we're going to look at Revelation 13 in some detail here this morning, tells us about this coming of this political ruler who will be empowered by Satan. Revelation 13 verse 1 says this, "And he stood on the sand of the seashore, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads. And on his horns were 10 diadems or crowns, and on his heads were blasphemous names." Verse 2, "And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority." Now this is somewhat mystical. It's a little allegorical. And mysterious. And so sometimes people just say, well, that's weird. You can't understand any of it. It doesn't make any sense. Well, the Bible defines these things for us if you study them out. If you go back to the book of Daniel, as God was showing Daniel the future and the future world empires and governments and kingdoms, God was showing Daniel this 2,500 years ago, 500 or 600 years before John the Apostle received this revelation at the Isle of Patmos in around 85 or 90 A.D. That is the book of Revelation. So this is something that God has already revealed. He's already defined what these creatures are and so forth. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, we read this. After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong. And it had large iron teeth, and it devoured, and it crushed, and it trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. Verse 8, while I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up from among them. And 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. This is the Antichrist. God had showed Nebuchadnezzar earlier in Daniel chapter 2, and then God is once again showing Daniel here in a vision the future kingdoms of the world, starting with the Babylonians, then you had the Medo-Persians, then you had the Greeks, and then you had the Romans. All of that was predicted by God. Those 4 world empires were predicted by God in the book of Daniel 550 years before Christ. And every one of those kingdoms came exactly as God predicted that they would. But the last beast, the final beast, which is the Roman Empire, that God revealed, there was going to be an extension of this ruler, or of this rule, of this kingdom that would come in the last days at the end times. And this is the fourth beast. And then it starts off basically describing this beast as dreadful, as terrifying, as extremely strong, with large iron teeth. It was going to be a force to be reckoned with. And indeed, the Roman Empire was that to the known world 2,000 years ago. But then coming out of that fourth kingdom, the Roman Empire, you have this little horn that begins to be exposed and revealed. And the horns here are talking about kings or kingdoms, leaders that are going to join together as a confederacy. And we're going to see that again in the book of Revelation. The 10 horns would be 10 kings that basically unite together. And then there's this little horn, this insignificant one, this leader that comes up kind of like from left field, apparently, who is going to supplant 3 of the kings. So he's going to remove 3 of the kings. So then you had 10 minus 3, you now have 7. He will be an 8th who will come up, and he will ultimately take over the whole machine. He's going to take over the whole government that these 10 kings found in the last days. And this horn, it says, possessed eyes like a man and a mouth uttering great boasts. He's going to be a big mouth. He's going to be a big talker, and he's going to be boastful and prideful and arrogant. You skip to verse 19 of Daniel 7. He says, "Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance than its associates." So Daniel is seeing the coming of the Antichrist 2,550 years ago and writing it down, and he's perplexed, he's curious, he wants to know, what is this? Who is this? This little horn that's coming. Verse 21, he says, "I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the Highest One, and the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. Thus he said," verse 23, "the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and it will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous one, and he will subdue 3 kings. So God defines for us these terms and these mysteries, so we know what he's talking about. When he's talking about horns and beasts and heads of a monster and so forth, he is telling us what they are. These are kings, and this is a kingdom. 10 horns are 10 kings. There's another, an 11th, that arises after them. He's going to take 3 of the other kings away, so now you have 8 kings ruling this confederate worldwide government, and then he's going to take over everything. Verse 25 says, and he will speak out against the Most High, so he will be one who's known for blaspheming the God of the Bible, blaspheming the God of heaven. He will wear down the saints of the highest one. These are the tribulation saints, those who are alive in the tribulation period. We believe after the church age is over and the rapture has taken place. It says, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. And this is later defined for us as a 3.5-year period, 42 months, 1,260 days. The Bible in different places tells us exactly what the time frame is that he is going to rule over the earth in total power and domination, and it's 3.5 years. So time is, in this example, time is a 1-year marker, times is 2 years, so 1 plus 2, and then half a time is 6 months. So you end up with 3.5 years. And we see that number used over and over again in the book of Revelation and later in the book of Daniel for the period of time that the Antichrist will be ruling over the earth, 3.5 years. It says in verse 26, but the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. And his kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. And so Satan in the end is going to lose. He loses in the end. He doesn't win. He's on borrowed time. He knows it. He's angry. He's angry because his time is short. And yet in the end, Jesus Christ is going to take his kingdom. Jesus Christ is going to rule with righteousness and justice, and the result will be peace. And there will be an everlasting kingdom that will remain forever and ever. And all dominions will serve and obey Jesus. Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. This is what's coming. The Antichrist is coming, but he's going to lose, and Jesus Christ is going to rule and reign over all the earth forever and ever. So we have the beast defined for us. I just wanted to take you back there to show you that the 10 heads of the beast in Revelation 13 are 10 kings with 10 diadems or crowns indicating their rule. And now you have this beast that is coming up out of, again, Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. He's coming up out of the sea. And out of the sea, when the Bible talks about the sea in this sense, it's generally talking about the world, the Gentile nations of the world. And so some have suggested the Antichrist is going to be Jewish. There really is no indication that he is Jewish. It doesn't really tell us where he comes from exactly, other than he's going to come out of the revived Roman Empire, which is probably Europe, Southern Europe, modern-day Turkey, somewhere in that area was kind of the seat of power. Rome and Constantinople primarily were the seat of power for the Roman Empire. But we're not sure exactly where he's going to come from, or if he's going to be a Gentile or a Jew. He's most likely going to be a Gentile because he's coming up out of the sea, the Gentile nations. Now we're told that all of these animals are very powerful animals, of course. A leopard is fast and powerful. A bear is big and powerful and fierce. A lion is the king of the jungle. So, all of these illustrations are showing what kind of power and speed that this man is going to have. He's going to have tremendous power, and he's going to be able to move at tremendous speeds to take over the world. But he's empowered by a dragon. Interesting. The dragon gave him his power and his throne and his great authority. The dragon is defined for us as the devil in Revelation chapter 12, the chapter before this. So we know the identity of the dragon. The dragon is Satan. And so this king, this ruler, is going to be empowered by the devil himself. Now, verse 3 tells us of Revelation 13, and I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain. This is one of the heads of the beast. And his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. So initially the beast is referred to as this, 10-headed, or 10 horns and 7 heads and 10 crowns and so forth. That's initially the beast, and that is the confederacy that brings the Antichrist into power, although they probably don't know they're bringing the Antichrist into power. He just takes over. But then as the Bible's talking about the beast, it's not just talking about the one world political establishment that the Antichrist will rule over, but it's also speaking synonymously with the individual himself, the Antichrist himself, who's ruling over the one world government. But it says that it's going to appear as if he had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. So this is now a counterfeit resurrection. He will probably be assumed dead 3 days, and then will be resurrected as Jesus was after 3 days, because this is a counterfeit. Satan is a counterfeiter. He's not original. He counterfeits and he duplicates what God does. And so you have the Antichrist, you have the dragon, who is Satan, and you have the false prophet. You have a trinity, a counterfeit trinity. Satan always duplicates what God does. You have a Messiah figure who is killed, likely assassinated, and believed to be dead. Whether he's really dead or not doesn't say. It says that it saw as one of his heads as if it had been slain. So maybe he's not dead. But either way, he comes back to life and is resurrected, and his fatal wound is healed. Fatal wound would mean it's fatal. He's going to die. But the fatal wound is healed. And the interesting thing is the Bible says the whole earth was amazed. Now, how could the whole earth know that something's happening over in Jerusalem or Rome or Constantinople? Certainly when this was written, that wasn't possible. The whole world couldn't know what's happening in one place in the world. It would take years or decades at that time for information to get out to the rest of the world. And then there were parts of the world that weren't even discovered. They thought that the earth was flat. Interesting. People still think the earth today is flat, apparently. But back then, they really believed the earth was flat, and they'd fall off the edge of the ocean. And so they didn't even know how big the world was when this was written. And yet God is showing us the future. He's saying at this time, the whole world is going to see this event. The whole world is going to be amazed. And it's going to follow after the beast. And now, with the advent of the technology that I was describing earlier, we know that anything that happens in the world, we're all notified instantaneously. Immediately, we all know, if we have a cell phone in our pocket, we all know what's going on in the world at any time. And so, again, this was a prediction that wouldn't have even really been possible and understandable up until just recent times, where you have the technology that the whole world can, because you can't get the whole world to come to one place. That's not possible. So you have to bring that event to the whole world, and that's what we have with our technology today. The whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. How many of you got that text message from the President of the United States a couple of months ago? You all did. I know you all did, because it was in the media, and I got the text message that the President was just communicating with us on the new emergency system, to where a message will be sent to every American instantaneously when something happens of great importance to our country. The technology is here for this already, for the whole world to see something happening as it happens, live streaming, or as it takes place, pushed out on the internet. Verse 4 says, and they worshiped the dragon. Who's the dragon? The dragon is the devil. That's what he's always wanted. That's right, it's Satan. He's always wanted to be worshiped like God. They worshiped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast and who is able to wage war with him? Now this is likely all going to transpire halfway through the 7-year tribulation period. His fatal wound, the world mourning, his fatal wound being healed, his counterfeit resurrection. This is all going to be at the 3.5-year mark, halfway through the 7-year tribulation period. And this is then what brings about the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of by Daniel the prophet, that Jesus refers to, where he then declares himself as God, as we're going to see, and he demands to be worshipped as God. But notice that the world's population is concerned with security. They're concerned with safety. And they really don't have a lot of security, apparently, up to this point, because there is war that the Antichrist brings as he is coming to power. He's a very violent military strategist and leader. As a matter of fact, if you look back in Revelation chapter 6, we see kind of the kickoff of the tribulation period. I'll read it to you here. Revelation 6:1 says this, and I saw when the Lamb broke one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying as with the voice of thunder, come. And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. And when he broke the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature saying, come. And another, a red horse, went out. And to him who sat on it, it was granted to take peace from the earth, and that men should slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. And so this is a type of what's coming. It's giving us different illustrations: a white horse, a red horse, the black horse, and then the ashen horse. And so each of these horses are bringing something to the earth as the tribulation period kicks off. And so initially, the rider on the white horse is very likely referring to the Antichrist. He's going to come in like Jesus. Remember, Jesus is going to come back on a white horse at the end of the tribulation period. In Revelation chapter 19, Jesus Christ is going to come back to destroy the Antichrist, and he's going to come back riding what? A white horse. And so the Antichrist comes, and he is a counterfeiter. He's coming to do basically what Jesus is going to do, but he's a phony. He's a counterfeiter. He's a liar. He's a deceiver. So he comes in riding on a white horse, pretending to be Jesus, pretending to be the Messiah, the Antichrist in the place of Christ. He has a bow. He has a crown. And initially, he's going to come with peace plans. He's going to come bringing peace. How do we know that? Because the red horse comes and takes peace from the earth. So he's going to bring a false peace treaty to Israel, most likely. He is going to allow the Jews, through his peace treaty with Israel and the nations of the world, to rebuild their temple. That is what is most likely going to kick off the 7-year tribulation period. And then at some point, he is going to, once he has enough power, he is going to take peace from the earth, and he is going to bring war. And so the red horse is the next horse that is revealed to take peace from the earth, and that men should slay one another, and a great sword was given to them. Verse 5, when he broke the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature saying, come. And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard, as it were, the voice in the center of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. So the Antichrist comes as a false peacemaker. Once he has enough power, he takes peace from the earth, and he takes what he wants by the sword, and he brings war to the earth. As a result of the war, you now have famine, which is always the result of war if you study history. People can't plant their crops. Their lands are destroyed by military battles and artillery, explosions and so forth. Cities are razed to the ground in bombing raids and so forth. And so you have war. As a result of war, you have scarcity of resources, scarcity of food. And now food is being sold literally. A quart of wheat might be enough, food for an individual or maybe a couple of individuals for a day's wage. So if an average day's wage at $20 or $25 an hour is, $125 or $150 a day, or whatever number you want to use as an average day's wage, that's how much it's going to cost someone in that time to get food to eat for that day. So they're all of their money that they earn for the day is just going to be enough to keep them alive on a quart of wheat. You could also get 3 quarts of barley, but apparently barley is really only good for feeding to animals and horses and cattle and sheep and so forth. I don't know that you could live on eating barley. I suppose you could try. But you could get 3 quarts of barley for a day's wage. So imagine going to the store and getting, a package of cream of wheat, and it costs you $150 to get a one-day supply of cream of wheat for your family. That's how it's going to be at this time, the scarcity and the famine that will result from the war. So people are going to be desperate. People are going to be clamoring for security. They're going to want the war to end. They're going to want peace so they could go back to the days of prosperity when they were just living lavish lifestyles, and all of that has all of a sudden disappeared. And now they're starving to death, and there's uncertainty, and there's war. Interesting that he says, do not harm the oil and the wine. The rich people are still going to be rich, and they're still going to have their oil and their wine and all their luxurious goods during this time. Verse 7 says, and when he broke the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature saying, come. And I looked, and behold, an ashen or a pale horse, and he who sat on it had the name of Death. That was one of the questions on Jeopardy. Which horse was called Death of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? And it was, of course, the 4th horse. The ashen horse is called Death. And Hades, or hell, was following with him. And authority was given to him over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword, with famine, with pestilence or disease, and with the wild beasts of the earth. And so the glory days, the days of prosperity and lavish lifestyles is going to come to a sudden end. Not immediately. When the Antichrist comes immediately, he's probably going to be, winning the Nobel Peace Prize and so forth. Everyone's going to love him. He's going to be the man of the year. He's going to be solving problems the world has been trying to solve for a long time. Bringing different warring factions together and bringing them to the peace treaty table and signing agreements and getting wars to stop. And so he's going to look like a really good guy. People are going to think, hey, this guy's great. And then war comes as a result of his rule. And then we go back to Revelation chapter 13. He's going to be apparently killed. He's going to receive at least a fatal wound that should kill him. And then he comes back to life. The whole world is amazed, follows after him. And then they begin to worship the dragon, the devil, because that's who he's going to give the credit to for his miraculous healing. And they're going to worship him, the beast, because they say, who is like the beast, Revelation 13:4, and who is able to wage war with him? They're going to be willing to give up their privacy for security. And ultimately, they're going to give up all their privacy because they're going to take his mark on their right hand of their forehead in order to have his protection, his security, his provision, because who's able to wage war with him? It's going to be a very violent time on the earth, and people are going to be aligning themselves with the most powerful leader and ruler for that reason. Revelation 13:5 says, and there was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies. Remember, that's what Daniel said about him? He's a big mouth, arrogant boaster. Daniel told us in Daniel chapter 7. This is what John is telling us. He's going to speak arrogant words and blasphemies. And authority to act is given to him for 42 months. That's 3.5 years, the Great Tribulation period. So apparently his fatal wound occurring, the whole world seen it. Him being healed of the fatal wound and resurrected, the whole world seen it. Now he has 42 months to really rule over the earth. But he opens his mouth in blasphemies against God, verse 6, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is those who dwell in heaven. And so blasphemy is going to be a big part of his platform. He is going to blame the God of heaven, probably for all the problems that he brought about on the earth. He is going to curse God. He's going to blaspheme God. He's going to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, the heavenly host, and those who dwell in heaven. Those are all the saints and the people who have died and gone before us. He's going to curse them all. He's going to blaspheme them all. And again, what do we see in our culture today? We see blasphemy becoming the norm. Blasphemy is not an unusual thing. We're not shocked anymore when people use Jesus Christ's name in correlation to a curse word, or when they join Jesus Christ's name to other vulgarity. It's not even, we don't even bat an eye anymore. You know, it's normal. We've become desensitized to it. Children talk this way in the schools because of the media. And so, it is interesting that Hollywood doesn't blaspheme any other religious ruler's name, right? They don't use Buddha's name as a cuss word on HBO or whatever, or at the movies. They don't use Muhammad's name when somebody smashes their thumb with a hammer. Oh, Muhammad, as they smash their thumb with a hammer. But they curse Jesus Christ when they smash their thumb with a hammer. And so it is interesting. Why would Jesus be the only name that people want to use as a curse word? Why not all the other? Why not, Krishna and, Sai Baba and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, or, any of these other, the Buddha, Muhammad? Why don't they curse his name? Why is it just Jesus' name? So it shows you the spirit behind it, that it's the spirit of Antichrist. It's the spirit of the devil that wants to curse Jesus' name, because in the end, Jesus is going to defeat him, and every knee will bow and tongue confess the name of Jesus Christ later. And so now he is blaspheming and making blasphemy part of his platform, and the world is once again being prepared for this today. No one's going to bat an eye as he blasphemes God. He blasphemes his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Verse 7 says, "It was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him." Now, the reason that we believe that this cannot be speaking of the church is because Jesus said, "I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it," will not overcome it. And for 2,000 years, as much as Satan has tried, the church is still here, alive and well on planet Earth. Maybe waning in certain parts of the world, but growing in other parts of the world. Satan has never been able to obliterate the church, to stamp out the church, ever in 2,000 years. And that is a fulfillment of the prophecy of Jesus Christ, who said, "I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it or prevail against it." So when we read here that Satan himself overcomes the saints, we know this can't be speaking of the church. This has to be speaking of a different group of people. So it falls in line with our theology that we believe the church will be raptured to heaven. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, the rapture of the church that is prophesied and predicted to come in the last days. We believe that the rapture will take place first, and these folks that are left are the ones who were not part of the church. They were not born again by faith through faith in Jesus Christ. But they're not going to take the mark of the beast either. They know enough to know not to get the mark, not to take the 666. And so they are going to be the tribulation saints. In the Old Testament, you had the Jews. They were God's chosen people, the instrument of God to reach the nations, to reveal God and his word and his law to the nations. When the nation of Israel rejected Jesus Christ, it opened the door for the Gentiles to be part of God's people. And so you had the church born on the day of Pentecost. The church now took over that role as the torchbearer. Israel failed in their job to reach the Gentile nations, to reveal the God of heaven. Matter of fact, the Israelites ended up going and worshiping the other gods, the pagan gods of the nations, rather than converting the world to worship the one true God. When they rejected Christ, it opened the door to the Gentiles and the Jews to be a part of the church. We are part of the church today. God has set Israel aside. He's going to bring Israel back at the tribulation period and restore his relationship, his covenantal relationship with the Jews at that time. Once the church age is over, that chapter is closed like in a book, and then you have another group of people on the earth, a third identifiable group of people, which we call the tribulation saints. These are the folks that were not part of the church. They went into the tribulation period. They did not go with the rapture, but they know better than to follow the Antichrist and serve him. And so they are going to pay dearly for refusing to submit and surrender their will to the Antichrist, because they're going to be rounded up and they're going to be beheaded. And it says, verse 7, it was given to him, the Antichrist, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Can't be the church. Otherwise, Jesus didn't tell us the truth when Jesus said, the gates of hell will not prevail against my church. Verse 8 says, and all who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. And so now the whole world, he has authority over all the tribes, all the peoples, all the tongues, all the nations of the earth. So it's not just a limited rule. It's not just a regional rule. It's not even just a rule over a continent. This is over the whole world's population that he will have authority over. And it says, all who dwell on the earth will worship him. Again, the only way this is possible to happen is with the advent of technology and the internet, because the whole world can't get on a ship and go to one place and worship one leader, whether it's Caesar in the past, or Caesar Augustus, or Alexander the Great, or Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, Cyrus and Darius of the Persian Empire, King Henry VIII. I mean, whatever ruler you want to pick in history, the whole world couldn't go and worship that ruler anytime in the past, but today they can. And today they do worship people, movie stars, sports figures, musicians, and they worship and they adore. And so this is going to be the case. Again, this couldn't have been possible before the technology was there. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who had been slain. And so we have to make sure that our names are written in the book of life. And that is our main and chief objective as Christians, is to make sure we're saved and that we're taking as many people to heaven as possible with us, that they would also have their names written in this book, the book of life of the Lamb who had been slain. Verse 9, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. And so it is very likely that they are going to, the tribulation saints, take up arms against the Antichrist, and in the end they're going to be overcome and overwhelmed. They won't be able to fight against him militarily. Jesus said, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. Verse 11, and I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. So he's going to look like, again, the lamb is speaking of Jesus. He's going to look like Jesus. He's going to look like a spiritual man. He's going to look humble like a lamb. But as soon as he opens his mouth, he sounds like the devil. His words are devilish and are like spoken by the dragon. Verse 12, he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. That's the Antichrist. He makes the earth and all those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. And he performs great signs, so that he makes even fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth, because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life, and there was given to him breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast might even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And so this is the false prophet. The Antichrist is a political ruler. He's a political and military ruler. Now he has his John the Baptist. Now he has his Elijah, who's going to come and who's going to point people to him, like John the Baptist pointed people to Jesus. Kingdom of heaven is at hand, repent. He's going to be pointing people to the devil, to the Antichrist, and encouraging and ultimately demanding that the people worship this man, the Antichrist. He's going to perform signs. He's going to make fire come down out of heaven. And it's not going to be CGI technology. It's going to be real. People are going to see it with their own eyes. They won't believe their eyes. But he's going to have a tremendous amount of power to perform signs and miracles and wonders, again, as a counterfeit to the Holy Spirit, who, when the Holy Spirit came upon the church, they performed signs and miracles and wonders. And so he's a counterfeit to the Holy Spirit, the second person, or the third person, rather, of the Trinity. So it says that he's going to give breath to the image of the beast, verse 15, that the image of the beast might speak, and as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. This is no doubt going to be some sort of technology that's going to be in place. Perhaps it'll be a living sort of a hologram. The technologies, what we see with our iPhones or our Android smartphones is 50 years behind the technology that they have in the labs right now. The stuff that they're doing out at Skunk Works, Lockheed Skunk Works, and these things, we only know about the stuff they were working on in the 70s. We don't know what they've been working on since the 70s and the 80s, 90s, because it's secret. It's top secret stuff. And so there are technologies out there that we have no idea about. And no doubt when the Antichrist comes, he's going to get all of that. He's going to have it all available at his disposal. So this image that's going to be given breath, it's going to be a living image, and it's going to speak, and it's going to cause as many as don't worship the image of the beast to be killed. You could almost see this now with a FaceTime sort of a thing, some sort of a duo streaming service or a Skyping service. We already have the technology here to see somewhere on the other side of the world, they could see us. Then you have the advent and the wraparound of AI, artificial intelligence, at work here, which again, we have no idea how far developed artificial intelligence is. We're going to look at a little bit of that next week. But they call the point where the computer becomes as smart as a human being, begins to think and reason for itself, they call that singularity. And it is no doubt that we are going to achieve singularity soon, if we already have not achieved singularity, where they have computers that actually think and reason for themselves and make their own decisions. And actually take on probably their own personality, like the computer HAL in 2001: A Space Odyssey. And so all of this is going to be at play here as the Antichrist is monitoring people. He knows who's going to be following him, who's going to be worshiping him, who's going to be loyal to him. And if you're not, he's going to kill you. Verse 16, he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the freemen and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. He provides that no one should be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man. His number is 666. And 6 is the number of man. Man was created on the 6th day. One short of perfection. Number 7 is the biblical number of perfection. Man is short of perfection. Only God is perfect. Man was given 6 days to work. On the 7th day he rested. So 6 is the number of man. Satan is going to come and he is going to take the number of God, which is 3, the triunity of God, and he is going to take a 666. 1 6 for the beast, 1 6 for the dragon, and 1 6 for the false prophet, the counterfeit trinity. apparently at the time of the tribulation period, people are going to be able to identify this mark. No one knows what it is today. You have a million theories, and they've all been wrong about what the mark of the beast is. The 666, what that number means exactly, or what the calculation is. But no doubt at the time that this is happening on planet Earth, they will be able to calculate the number of the beast, and they will understand it. And then they will choose either to put the chip in their hand or the mark in their hand or their forehead, or they will choose to defy the Antichrist, and then they will initially be excluded from the economy. Imagine if all the power went out, you couldn't get to your bank account, you couldn't fill your car up with gas. If it was sort of an EMP sort of a situation where all the electronic magnet pulse that comes, EMP attack or EMP through a giant asteroid coming into our atmosphere and exploding in the right place or the wrong place, it could take out the entire electrical grid, it could take out the internet immediately, and then people would be basically at the mercy of the government, because they wouldn't be able to access food. There would be no food at the grocery stores. The grocery store shelves would be empty. You wouldn't be able to get to your bank account because you're frozen out of your ATM card. You don't have any cash because nobody's going to have any cash at this point in the future. It'll be a cashless society. And so they're going to be totally dependent upon this Antichrist and his mark if they want to eat, if they want to have, medicine for their loved ones, if they want to have baby food for their baby and diapers for their babies. I mean, you start to think about that. People will, sometimes they'll do whatever it takes in order to take care of themselves and their family. And that's the sort of situation they're going to find themselves in at this point. It's not somewhere that I want to be. I pray that our theology is right, and I believe it is, that the rapture is going to happen before all of this takes place. If we're wrong, then we'll trust the Lord at that time to see us through, to stand our ground for Jesus Christ.